Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Richmond City Council for Monday, February 24th, 2025. May I have a motion on the minutes? Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor, post carried. Any agenda additions or deletions?
None, Your Worship.
All right, may I have a motion to resolve into committee of the whole to hear delegations on agenda items? All those in favor, post carried. Are there any parties here who wish to speak to us on items on the agenda? Any members of the public who wish to speak to us? All right.
Rise and report.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, post carried. That brings us to the consent agenda. There's a number of items on it. One item has been taken off the consent agenda. First of all, we have the receipt of the committee minutes, the official community plan targeted update, phase 1 public engagement summary, and phase 2. Additional information on the 2025 health, social, and safety grant applications. Then we have annual reports and 2025 work programs for the Seniors Advisory Committee and the Youth Advisory Committee. We have the Youth Strategy Highlights Report for 2023-24. Then the next one has been taken off the consent agenda. That's the housing agreement. We then have the amendment to the zoning bylaw 8500 to provide a zone for compact, small-scale, multi-unit housing. And finally, the Disaster Resilience and Innovation Grant for the North Dyke Preliminary Design Project Grant application. We have a motion to adopt those by general consent. So it's moved and seconded. Any comments or questions from anybody on the consent agenda items? Then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Before I go on, I'm sure the people over here are the people from the Langara journalism program, yes? So I just want to greet you and hope you have an interesting time. Find out how it's really done. And so just a word of explanation. We have a consent agenda. Everything comes to committee first. So we have a consent agenda. If it's unanimous at the committee stage, it comes on the consent agenda, which we just passed a whole bunch of these resolutions. Now, number 12 has been taken off the consent agenda. If a member of council wants to refer it or vote against it or amend it, or I guess there could be other things, then it comes off the consent agenda and we debate it in its entirety. So that applies to number 12. I'll go to Chair of Council Planning Committee, Councillor McNulty, to introduce this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Number 12 is an application to amend the housing agreement bylaw 9952, which is the Richmond Centre Phase 1. The committee recommendation is to amend the bylaw 10634 to be introduced and give first, second, and third readings. And I would so move it to put it on the floor.
Moved and seconded.
Yeah, now that it's on the floor, Your Worship, just explain what the applicant has asked for is to approve permitted rent rates and income thresholds as they apply to the housing agreement for new and in-stream development applications, even though we have had various rent rates in the past. And as a result of this, this particular one is in the city center. And we're talking where we have 74 Lemur units and 1,087 ownership units, and plus a bunch of commercial space. And on 135, our table at the back shows the maximum rent with the maximum incomes that people can have with regard to those particular rentals. So it's straightforward, it's a house cleaning, and it brings it up to date.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did ask to have this item removed. I'm going to have a question to staff and maybe a follow-up, and then I'll speak my piece on that then. So my question is, when we approve the overall like kind of citywide low-end market rental, that's what LEMUR stands for, We updated the rents, the maximum rents and all that stuff. The last page of that report back then, there was a table and it said, as of September 2024, there were 546 built and occupied lemur units. There was 895 approved and under development lemur units. The 79 that are being considered in this Richmond Centre Phase 1 project, could staff just comment which of those categories does it fit in, the built occupied or the approved and under development? And then have a follow-up.
Through your worship, Councillor Wolf, I'm looking for that table because I do have that report with me, but it would have been in the column of secured.
Okay. And then my follow-up then through the chair is this the first of those secured units to have council amend the bylaw to apply this new maximum rate to the existing agreements?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, that's correct. Yes, it is.
And then I guess there's one more follow-up. Do we expect then that many of the other hundreds of existing secured units are also going to be asked to increase the lemur rates?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, yes, we are aware of at least 5 other developments that will come forward.
Okay, thanks. Those are all my questions. I'll just make a comment then. I attended the planning committee meeting, although I'm not on it. I couldn't vote on it at the time. But my hesitation here supporting this, although I did support in November having this apply to new units, I'm slightly concerned because of the fact that in January 2019, I was just a few months on council, I did not approve the Richmond Centre development. And the main reason for that was they were kind of grandfathered in and they only had to build 10% of the units as lemur instead of everywhere else, like Lansdowne development had to do 15% and others potentially more. So I feel that this development was grandfathered in to build so few. They should also, and have so much more profit coming from all their other units that they can afford to compensate and allow the little bit more low when it comes to the low-end market rental for these 79 units. So I will not be supporting this adjustment. Thanks.
Councillor Day. Staff, why don't you stay here in case there's more questions?
So back when we first got this proposal for Cadillac Fairview, there was 1,087 units and 79 lemur. I was really disappointed in that number. As Councillor Wolf mentioned, that's not near what we get today. But our hands were tied behind our back because previous councils of the day had approved this ratio. But I did vote against it nonetheless, almost more in protest. So what this works out to, a studio unit will be $1,306, a 1-bedroom $1,552, a 2-bedroom $1,914, and a 3-bedroom $2,014. So I wanted just to ask staff, we don't really have any options on this, do we? Because of this previous agreement made many years ago, decades ago, by previous councils. We can't change how many lemur units. The only thing we can change is whether the rents are the new rates or the old rates for lemur. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, that's correct. What's in front of council today is an application to amend the rates only.
Yeah. It's not a great project, if you ask me, but I'm afraid we're stuck with it.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. I will be supporting this, and I think it's important that we ensure that our affordable housing units are able to be maintained so that they don't become dilapidated and everything else. I think the cost of maintaining and running any property, we all know that our properties have gone up. Anyone living in a strata knows that your insurance costs have gone through the roof recently because of all the things that have happened across Canada and through weather, through fires, through whatever. Insurance rates have gone up. There's a lot of extra costs in running these things. While we might have wanted more units at Richmond Centre, what happened at Richmond Centre is they were given pre-zoning on the land. In exchange, they rebuilt Richmond Centre Mall. So for anyone that was here in the olden days, when Richmond Center Mall was Richmond Square and Richmond Center, two separate malls, there was a gross little alley between the two of them. Well, that whole thing redeveloped. We ended up with movie theaters. The movie theater was taken out in the far corner, moved it inside. I'm sure lots of us went to the movies and spent lots of time. The mall was open to the seniors to go and walk through the mall because it was now a big circuit. They were able to come early in the morning and stay out of the rain and go for their walks in the morning. My grandmother used to live across the street. So the council at the time exchanged future density for Richmond Center redeveloping in the time. So at the time, there was a lot less going on in Richmond. There were a lot less sources of income. So either they took it from the community somehow, or they promised something future to the developers. So back in those days, they promised something future to the developers. The developers, 30 years later, you can build X number of units. Well, they took that deal. They built Richmond Center Mall. I'm sure we've all gone shopping there. We've all done stuff over at Richmond Center Mall. We've all been involved with them donating to the community and supporting the community. If now they're able to cash in 30 years later, good for them. They made a good deal. We shouldn't be mad about it. And they didn't have to give us any affordable housing units. They didn't have to give us any rental units. They actually agreed to give some affordable housing units and some rental units, and they agreed to make 50% of the units 2 bedrooms or more, so family friendly. So they've worked well, I think, with the City of Richmond. I think they're putting together a good project, but we have to make decisions, and we always make decisions. And this council makes decisions now, and it can choose to pre-zone things and get something built now in exchange for the possibility of the developer taking on that risk and being able to build it later. And I don't think we should be mad that a prior council made that decision. They made that decision. We can then make our decisions as we go. If you wanted to run for council back in '88, you probably should have. But, I went to council meetings back then, but not many, but I went to some.
All right, Councillor Howe.
Yeah, Your Worship, I just want to make sure that we understand how the system works. Now, staff is recommending changes of the maximum income threshold. And it's based on the decision that we make in November 2024. But is there a mechanism that, we would review or adjust after three years? Do we have a mechanism like that to make sure that, the income threshold and the rent is up to date?
Through your worship to Councillor Howe, we don't have a mechanism in the sense that there's a recurring commitment to reviewing them. What we've done and what council did in November was they benchmarked the rates against the CMHC market average, which adjusts annually. So now that it's based on a benchmarked average, it adjusts automatically annually. So it's the same for both the rates and the income thresholds.
Okay, so we don't have a built-in system to review and to adjust.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So on council page 135, look at the studio. So its maximum income is 52,000 and the maximum rent is 1,300 roughly. So if a party had a lower income, $40,000, would it still be the $1,300 for the rent?
Yes, your worship, it would.
So there's set amounts, and then maximum incomes are also set.
That's correct.
Okay. Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think your question might have just clarified my thing. So this is not adjusting the rates of the rent, it's only adjusting the incomes?
Through your worship to Councillor Glanders. Excuse me, no, it's adjusting both.
Both.
Is the application.
Okay, I was just curious. So now, at the time that this development was approved, the housing agreement came in 2019, securing the 79 Lemur. So that was an arrangement made then. So we have adjusted our rates going forward as of November because, as we know, the construction costs have gone way up, and builders have to put way more affordable housing and more market rental in than they did back then, and the operations of these units wasn't sustainable anymore, so we increased them. But why would we need to go back and change it on one from 2019?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Glanders.
Like, who asked for it, is my main question.
I can speak to this one. Through Your Worship, to Councillor Glanders, when the report came forward in November, staff indicated that new agreements may come forward for review. And this is really the first one to do so. And there will be more, because we expect that the rates that many builders had signed on previously they're not sustainable in terms of operating the buildings. So this is the first one to do this.
So, I mean, this development was built and sold in the heyday of profit for building towers. So they've already moved on to the next thing and they've made their money. Is it a concern that the housing operator for the affordable housing, is that a separate entity, or is it the developer? Like, is it like a Success or whatever, or is it an arm of the developer that's going to be operating the lemur? And is there actual financial evidence that shows that it's not going to be sustainable? And if it's not, then what would happen? So if they're stuck in the agreement with the old rates and they're saying, they're not making money on it, or it's not sustainable, what ends up happening?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Glanders, in this case, the Cadillac Fairview and SHAPE have an agreement with Kiwanis to operate the facility. Kiwanis can charge these rents accordingly at renewal when there's a new coming tenant. I don't believe there's concern in that. We also do an annual or every 2-year statutory declaration process. So we're able to see exactly what is charged, and we also assess incomes to see if they're qualified, those residents, and that information comes to council.
Yeah, so I think that, we're going to see previously approved projects come forward and ask for the new rates, because why wouldn't they ask? Because then they could get more. But unless there's a reason to believe that it's going to fail or there's a problem with it, I don't see why we would do that. I mean, the market sales that we made back then, if the condo values have gone up, the developer doesn't go back to the previous owners, the owners who bought in 2019, and say, actually, the price has changed. Now you owe me $400,000 more because your condo's gone up. That's not how it works. So why would it work the same for rental agreements? They were set in 2019, and they should stay that way. And in a couple of years, if they can come forward and say, this is our financials, and we're actually losing money every year on our rental rates, we would like to get a new housing agreement, we can look at it then. But I think they're just trying to cash in on the new rates, and they should have to stick with what it was done in 2019. It's not a new development, so I'm going to vote against this. Thanks.
Councillor Heed.
Thank you, Mayor. And just carrying on with what Councillor Glanders said before I get into my point here, is the fact that, can you clarify for me whether it's the builder that's going to be asking for the rate increase, or is it the operator?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Heed, it's the owner of the lemur units that will be asking for the additional rent.
So it wouldn't be the operator necessarily?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Heed, so the operator will collect the rent, and the owner has an operating arrangement with, in this case, Kiwanis.
Do you know if most of those agreements are based on a percentage?
Through Your Worship, Councillor Heed, I don't know the structure of those.
That's fine then. You recall that we had a discussion back in November of 2024 with respect to this, and you explained to me the CMHC average in order to determine what the actual rates would be. And at the same time, I asked the question as if the CMHC average came down, whether the builder, I guess, as you're informing me, would bring those rates down, or the builder would keep the rates at that. And I'm making an assumption now that the builder wouldn't lower the rates.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Heed, thanks for asking that question again. The rates for existing tenants, if the average came down, would remain fixed. The landlord would have the opportunity to increase those rates in accordance with any permitted rent increase under the Residential Tenancy Act. It's on new tenancy arrangements where the landlord or the owner would have the opportunity to charge those tenants the benchmark against CMHC. So if that benchmark went down, they would only be permitted to charge the lower rents.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And I'll just make a comment here is, yes, we're talking about historic agreements by historic councils that put this together. And yeah, Richmond Center may not be a good deal when we look at what we're getting for Lima rates now. And, you know, we've got builders upwards of 10% that are offering the Lima units. So, you know, that issue is beyond where we are for this particular time and these particular issues. But I cannot see, now that it's with the builder, any builder not coming forward and asking for an increase in these rates. It's, you know, they're business people. They're not philanthropic people in this particular issue, but I just can't see them. I think you're going to be inundated with the rates, whether we can bring in some parameters around that if in fact we get to an housing authority and limit the times that they can come in and ask for an increase. So that's just a comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair, thanks for the report, and we did have a good discussion at committee. I just want to ask you a question, and you can kind of clarify and add in a little bit of the history. I think one of the, and I know this is an old agreement and everything else, but I've actually gone on a tour of this site as well and gone through the Lemur units, and I will say they are very nice units, and a lot of them have even a view. So whoever moves in there, I think, will be very happy with them. But aside from that, can you just explain a little bit about why this is happening? Because the difference between how rents and incomes were determined before using consumer price index versus using what I think is more of a gold standard, CMHC, Canadian Mortgage and Housing, which is a more consistent, in my mind, and more predictable way to assess the rent and incomes. And it's not just the rent that's going up. Also, one thing that we've all talked about, I think, over the years is the income levels are going up. And I think that's really important too, because you don't want to have income levels that are so low that it basically forces people out, because it's household income, it's not just one income, right? So can you just comment a little bit on how those were set before CPI and what the advantage is in using Canadian Mortgage and Housing? Because the whole point of it is encouraging developments to be able to afford to be able to do the housing so we have more housing, right? So can you comment on that?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Hobbs. So in 2017, the city updated its affordable housing strategy, and in doing so, they set new starting rents for its low-end market rental housing units. At that time, they were set at 10% below the 2016 CMHC market averages for Richmond. So since that time, up until November of last year, all housing agreements used to secure Lemur units were using the base rate being that 10% below 2016 CMHC market averages. So those base rates have not changed, or had not changed until November of last year, when council gave direction to benchmark and to adjust annually to CMHC market average for Richmond.
Right, and I think that's a really good point you just made. Having things based on numbers from 2016, if you think of anything in your own life, is a little bit unrealistic. And for me, the reason I'll support this tonight is because I actually want more to get built. And so it has to be a formula that works for both developers and builders, and works for people who are the group that we're trying to assist through initiatives like supportive housing or Lemur. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'll finish up on this one. Just following along that, I think we have to be realistic of what is happening here, what's taking place. I think the guidelines that were under the auspices of, we thought about when we come in, and we all like us to think we've got a lot of lemur units. But the definition of lemur has changed. And it's changed because the CMHC since 2017 has raised its rates. Okay, and we're following them. Is that not correct, Your Worship? We're following we're still using 10% below CMHC average market rents. But the market rent of 2024, 2025 now is different than it was in 2016, correct?
Through your worship, that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. So we're applying the same rules and guidelines, but unfortunately, they have gone up. And the 30% of gross household income has also gone up. So if you wish, by definition, as it's changing, we've adopted the principles of CMHC following along, because every other development in Canada is probably doing the same thing, and they continue to go up. What we have tonight, this will be the benchmark then, will it not? This will be the benchmark.
Correct.
If another development comes along, we're starting here.
Correct.
Correct. So in 2026 or 2027, if CMHC changes its market rules, then we will go up accordingly.
The rate is indexed.
Rates will follow. I guess that's the thing, and I think that's the thing we have to be aware of. Nobody wants to see rents go up, but when you look at the rents, well below market value, obviously, and market rent, the maximum incomes we have to live with. They can go into them, but I think it was asked earlier, if somebody only made $40,000. They're going to end up paying the fee, same as somebody making $52,000 or whatever, or somebody with $30,000. Theoretically, they couldn't get a lemur unit.
Through the chair, they would be able to access it. They'd be paying more, but
of their gross income.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you. Anyhow, it was a good discussion round, and I think it brings everybody up to date, Your Worship, on this, and I think we put it out there. My question will be, how will we handle future requests? On a one-by-one basis if we have a template already?
One by one.
Through bylaw. Yes.
So
it would be
through
one by
bylaw,
It'll have
each
to
one of
be
them will be
council.
changed to the original bylaw. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Day.
Yeah, Terry, I have one other question. So last November, a whole bunch of the operators who run the lemurs and came to us, and they asked us to raise the rents so they could continue to operate all the lemur units, because as was pointed out, insurance and everything has gone up. Am I remembering that correctly?
Through the chair to Councillor, that is correct, and that's an important aspect because some of those nonprofit groups are actually having to subsidize their operations through donations. So it became an unsustainable program from their point of view, and that's the feedback we heard when we engaged them in the fall.
So then I'm a little confused, because Councillor Heed earlier asked you who gets the money, the operator or the owner? If the owner is still Cadillac Fairview or their subsidiary, could you just explain the dynamics of that?
The operator will collect it and the owner gets the money. And they have some kind of an arrangement as between them as to how much the operator is going to get paid. Right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
Yes.
So in this particular case, would the operator have to pay the difference between what it costs to operate the lemur units and what is being charged if we did not raise these rent rates?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, before the adjustment that council supported in November, that difference between financial feasibility and running into the red and having to rely on the donor base was greater. We now understand that if these rates are adjusted, they become a lot more financially sustainable over the long term.
All right. So I'm going to call the question on the motion in front of us. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. That brings us to the other item, which was already taken off the consent agenda, which is number 15, going back to the Chair of Planning Committee, Councillor McNulty.
Thank you, Your Worship. The referral response on the charging of fees for parking allocated to low-end market rental lemur, in this case units, in a transit-oriented area. And the recommendation is that, as described in the report of January 18, 2025, that the changes to the terms of affordable housing agreements to secure lemur units to permit a charge for parking as outlined in option 2. It'll be endorsed by council. And the use to enable owners of the lemur units to charge for any use of parking be used in the housing agreements for which they're conditionally approved, and those in the zoning amendment bylaws which will be executed, and the terms and use of the to enable owners of lemur units to charge for the use of parking be used in the future housing agreements associated with new or in-stream development application for which the condition has yet to be granted. And Your Worship, if we check to option 2 on page 174, I would
Let's have
so
a
move.
motion.
So moved.
So it's moved and it's seconded. Go
Thank
ahead.
you, Worship. The permit parking for charging of lemur units, the majority of lemur units are the area of public transit, and the ability to charge lemur tenants for the use of parking would support a greater cost recovery to the owner and would support sustainable transportation goals of the CCAP and the OCP that we have, and discussion with members of the Development Committee based in response to an ongoing statutory declaration. It's understood that the market charges for parking currently fall between $100 and $150 per month. And since it's moved and second on the floor, just a couple of questions of staff on this, if I could, and probably the other questions. So is this a suggested amount? What if in a particular lemur area that they want to go higher?
So, Your
Can they
Worship,
go higher? We're not putting any limits on it, are we?
That's correct. We're not prescribing the rates.
Well, it's a pity, I guess, in this case, we're just saying you can charge for parking, and I would think because we want to keep lemur units as low as possible in terms of the base, we've just had a discussion already of the lemur units going up. If we're now adding to that studio, if you wish, and I'll just use that studio of 1306, I had another $150. I now got $1,456 in terms of my rent per month, and that's without my strata fees. It's no longer a lemur unit, I guess is what I'm getting to. And I'm wondering how we might be able to eventually and look at it. And this is a result of Victoria, is this not correct? Through Bill 47 or 44, that we can now charge in transit oriented. So I guess I'm looking here from a personal point of view as a councillor to try to have a limit on it, if indeed they were charging, in addition to the increase at the maximum rent of the fees that we've just passed. And obviously we don't.
Let me ask that as a question. Why, is there some particular reason that we have not specified what the maximum parking rates would be?
Through Your Worship, to Your Worship, there's no particular reason. In our review of other municipal approaches, no other municipality has a similar term in their housing agreement that actually prohibits the owner from being able to charge for parking. So their council could direct staff to look at a percentage of market rates potentially.
I think we should refer this back and ask staff to take a look at potential limits on it. Because as Councillor McNulty is saying, when does it stop being a low-end market rental unit? Like if they want $500 per month, there should be some limit to keep a lemur unit as a lemur.
Yeah, I thank you, Worship. I'm of the same opinion, and that's why I was asking staff directly. I think there should be a a limit for the Lemur units and subsidized housing, what have you, that maybe even if people are fortunate enough to have a car, they shouldn't be able to be pushed out of the unit. I'm wondering if we can, do we need to do this right now? Is this urgent in that, can we approve in principle that, yes, we believe in the concept of, yes, you can charge for parking, but we don't know what those rates will be? Or should we refer the whole thing back? It'd be up to
From my
council.
point of view, if we refer it back, we're implicitly saying that we agree with the concept, but it needs limits.
Okay, well, after everybody has a chance to speak on this, I'd make the motion to refer this back to staff to examine all parking rates, and they may be different for different areas in the community as well, but to come back with us at a later date with this. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll see what other comments there are. Councillor Day.
Yeah, I voted against this in the planning committee meeting for pretty much those exact reasons, but if we look at the map on page 175, it's got circles out in Hamilton, circles down by where I live at 5 in Steveston, circles on the east end of Richmond. Is the plan that these parking rates would be charged in all these zones?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the recommendation that's in front of council is to enable the owner of a Lemur unit to charge for parking across the entire city.
Okay, because the only place I would agree that on a Lemur unit, it's different when you're buying your condo or whatever, but when you're in a low-end market rental unit, you're there for a reason. Your income is just not high enough to afford market rental. Now, the only exception is a Canada Line 800-meter buffer. If you live really close to the Canada Line, you don't really need a car. But if you're living out in Hamilton or you're living in Steveston or where I live, there's no buses at 10 o'clock at night. I mean, you'd be waiting forever. So I would agree with referring this back. I think we need to take a good, sober second look at this before we go ahead with any allowance of any parking rates.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair, thanks for the report, and there was a good discussion about it at planning again, and I did support it at planning, but just want to ask a couple questions about it. I mean, parking, I know there's a move, and with the TOA areas, the traffic, or the transit-oriented areas under Bill 47, I know there's an inclination or a movement towards people not using cars, but just on my own assessment or personal experience with various people, almost regardless of income, a lot of people still depend on cars for different reasons. It might be transporting kids to soccer game, or it might be to get to work where it's not convenient on transit. Point is, Lemur units are going to require a certain amount of parking. I don't think it's realistic to think that they're going to have none. And the cost for putting in parking stalls is almost cost prohibitive. Like, a lot of developers have come forward and said, hey, drop the parking requirement because there's a financial advantage to them in not putting in parking. You can put in more units. So I like the idea of possibly referring this back, because I think if we do allow there to be a charge for Lemur units, I would like to see it attached to the actual rent or income associated with the unit. And I won't prejudge what that percent should be, but obviously it would be something on the modest side, I think. But just for the public's information too, do you have the number of, I heard a number for parking stalls per parking stall when you put them in, and I'm wondering if you have that round number off the top of your head, because there is a cost to it.
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, you're asking for the construction value or construction cost of a
That
parking?
round number that they throw around.
I don't know if Mr. Craig has a different number, but I have heard up to $100,000 per stall.
Mr. Craig? Should be on.
Thank you. Through your worship, in terms of structured parking, especially below grade structured parking, that value reported by Mr. Newman would be correct.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one last question. I've already explained why I think I support a referral back to maybe attach it to a percentage of some kind. But the point I want to make, if there is no charge associated to parking at Lemur units or for Lemur units, what's the likely outcome in terms of parking that will be available to Lemur units? Like, would it be less? Would it be more? Would it be the same?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, I would say one of the risks in this is that within transit-oriented areas, the provincial legislation now says you cannot require parking for residential uses. So if council were to say that you can't charge the tenants of Lemur units for the use of parking allocated to those units, they may not get built at all. So the way the province, I think, is looking at this is let the market decide how much parking to supply in these areas that are well served by transit.
Right. And I think letting the market decide, there's merit to that argument. But as I said before, I think parking is going to be a requirement for people in the community, Lemur units or other units. And I think that we should try to work out some kind of percentage or arrangement that is reasonable and cost effective and doesn't totally separate out the whole philosophy of what a Lemur unit is about. You don't want to have it $500 or $600 a month, right? So nobody wants that. So whatever reasonable amount, I would support a referral. Thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you. I think we can all agree that we should be providing affordable housing for people, but I don't know that we owe people free parking, particularly in the city center. I know that there's plenty of street parking, but everyone who owns houses in this city seems to be very entitled to the space right in front of their own house, even though that's public property. So I don't think that people should be prevented from parking in front of other people's houses overnight or what have you. I think so then there is a market rate for parking, so you build a place that has affordable housing in it. Those people should be allowed to park anywhere in the neighborhood they want. Whose job is it to provide the housing for them? Do we think that it's the new people that moved into that same building who are able to afford a place? Or do you think the entire community should bear the burden of people parking in the community? I think people should be allowed to park anywhere in the neighborhood they want. I think that it is a bit dogmatic to decide who should get parking or not get parking, or whether or not you should get affordable rates of parking. I do think that there should be special rates for accessible vehicles. So if we are building affordable housing, I think some of those housing should be built out specifically for people in wheelchairs, and those should come with a parking spot that is fully accessible, that works for a van accessible spot. I think that makes absolute sense because the two things work together. We all like free parking, but we don't all like to share our free parking. And I think we also need to be careful. Just because you say that a spot's going to be $500, well, then you would park somewhere else if you could. But if the market rate is $500 for a spot and you get one for free, then we have to make sure that if you're getting one of those affordable spots, that it's your vehicle in it, because what prevents you from now resubletting your parking spot and making that $500 yourself, right? So we're trying to work on the equity, what makes sense for everybody, what's going to be fair. So I think we can look at it further if you want to refer it, but I think we need to take these things into consideration as to who's using it, who's the end user, is that in fact the person? Does everyone get one? Because when we build these affordable housing, the ratio of parking to the actual spots it's not a 1-to-1 ratio for the studios and 3 bedrooms, right? So people's needs are going to be different. And yeah, I also think that we need to look at how we allocate parking in the neighborhoods. I don't think you should be able to kick people out of your parking spot in front of your house after 3 hours. So I think people should be allowed to park in front of other people's houses. I think it's public space, and I think we can probably wrap our heads around it, especially if we live near a place where some affordable housing's been built.
Didn't we say when Bill 44 and 47 came in, that one of the quite likely results would be some kind of a parking tag system like they have in Vancouver everywhere, so it's resident-only parking? Isn't that likely?
Through your worship, I'm not sure.
Okay. Councillor Heed.
Yes, just to be clear, is we don't want to separate these people that can't afford market rents from others. We don't want to put them in a category of affordable housing, not affordable housing. We're giving them a break here. We want them to cohabitate with people that are paying market rent. So I think it's very important that we don't label them and try and single them out and give them something very different. Mayor, I like your idea there of having this go back, because this is the question I have. You were quite eloquently explaining to me how you determine the rates from CMHC on the 10% of the market rate and all that. So when you put in your report 100 to 150 a month, do we get that off specific data, or do we just pull that out of a hat?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, the number came out of some consultation.
Hobbs.
Councillor Hobbs, Councillor Heed, my apologies.
I'm better looking.
The information came from consultation with some of our counterparts in other municipalities, and then a couple of developers as well.
Okay, so we don't have, for example, the same type of data that you use for the market rentals. So I'm not opposed to having them pay something if in fact they're part of the lemur. What that is, I don't know, Mayor, so I absolutely agree if we can look at saying, okay, we think it's a good idea, we'll, if we're able to pass it based on that, but come back to us and we'll determine what it's going to be.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just first question to staff is, do you know how many parking stalls are being provided in the Richmond Centre building for the 79 lemur units?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, no, I don't.
Okay, so I'll just assume there's one for each, and that in the report you say it's understood that the market charge for parking is between 100 and 150. So I'll just take the 150. So that means that the owner is now, as of the last council decision a few minutes ago, we're up in the rates, rental rates for the lemur units, and we're also charging them almost $12,000 a month for all 79 units. That's about almost $150,000 a year that the owner is going to get on top of these extra rental rates. Not saying how I would vote if this went forward today, because it sounds like it's going to a referral, and I think there definitely needs to be more work put into it. Thank you.
Councillor Galanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for this good discussion. I just have a couple of questions and then some comments. So the beginning of the report, it says this is for transit-oriented areas. But then the map has transit-oriented areas and frequent transit service areas. So is it, the proposal is for both, for all?
Through your worship to Councillor Glanders, the purpose of the map was to show where you can no longer require.
That's where you,
parking?
yeah, okay. So that's what I thought. So in the blue bubble, that's the transit-oriented area, you were not allowed to restrict parking there at all. So they can choose to build no parking. But that's also true in the frequent areas with the red bubbles?
Through your worship, Councillor Glanders, I believe so.
Okay. That's interesting. And then how, if we pass this, how would it apply to any lemur units that were already built that have, let's say every unit has a parking spot and it's included in their rate? Would they then have to pay even though it was previously included?
Through your worship to Councillor Glanders, no, and I'm glad you raised the question, because similar to the lemur rates, anyone that currently has, any development that currently has a housing agreement that prohibits the owner from charging for parking could continue to no longer charge for parking. They would have to come to council and ask and apply for an amendment to their housing agreement.
Would there be if this goes to referral, I'm wondering if there'd be an option to look at only applying this in the transit-oriented bubble. So I just think in our city, the way we're so sprawled out that, and the developments that are outside of that area are still going to realistically have parking, but the ones by the SkyTrain might not. And that kind of, to Councillor Heed's point about not wanting to separate out the people that have lower end market rental and the people that have market rental, let's say, or that have strata condos, if the developer doesn't have to put any parking in at all, and they're not allowed to charge the people with lemur units, are they allowed to charge the people with market rental?
Through your worship to Councillor Glanders, yes.
So then what I think you'd see is all the people with market rental and all the people that bought their units will have parking spots, and then the people that have lemur units won't have any parking spots. Then it creates a separation. So I like the idea of having an option to pay for parking, because then the market will dictate how many spots get built, and then people, some spots will get built, because I'm just afraid they won't build any, like you say in your report. And I know lots of people that would like to live downtown and not have a car, and they would prefer that the price not be built into their rental unit already, because they want that option. But that doesn't really apply with the lemur, right? Because the lemur rates are set no matter what. So in your research, in this report, you don't specifically say, but is one of the reasons why it's desirable to have it be that you can charge for parking, because that will make the whole overall operation more affordable and could potentially reduce rents on the market rental side?
Through your worship to Councillor Glanders, you may have to clarify, but I think if the market is given the chance to decide, it's going to provide parking that is necessary to serve the demands of the tenants of the development across the board. So I don't think that if you allow the market to control it, there would be a corresponding impact on rent rates.
And just one more question. Councillor Lulu mentioned, if there's an accessible unit and a lemur unit, it should have an accessible spot for a van. But would there be any requirement? Is there already any requirement for that?
Through your worship to Councillor Glanders, the new legislation actually does allow municipalities to require the supply of accessible parking, and currently it's a unit based on the number of units overall in the development. So I don't know the standard offhand, but let's say it's one accessible stall for every 30 units.
So that does have to be in there.
That can remain within the city zoning bylaw.
And if we pass this, then we would be, that unit renter would have to pay for that parking spot.
Well, we're going to find that out.
Yeah, that should all be
referred
more,
back.
yeah, so deeper dive into all the numbers would be great on the referral. I would support that.
All right, so I'm going to move referral back to, for staff to recommend limits and other options for the parking stalls on lemur units. Okay. So on the referral, on merits of referral, Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, I'm going to support the referral. And what you have said, as we know, a vehicle is a necessity in this community. But I'm also wondering, in terms of doing with our referring our map on page 175, is we look at geography in relation to services, where people are and where people are situated on that referral, because there could be different rates in different areas of the city. And that would be part of that referral, because transportation is important. And the other thing, Your Worship, I just wondered whether we could send a letter to the province to say.
No, we're on merits of referral.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, I'll after that, and then, okay, I'll support referral. I
Well,
just
you
want to
would-
make sure the geography in relation to services when we're looking at rates and referring it back to staff, because Hamilton is a lot different than in other areas than the SkyTrain, which is 400 meters away from my home, so to speak. I'm 5 miles away from.
Yes.
Okay, so to look at that in terms of balancing, and I do want to make a comment after in referral or a motion to rate the province.
I don't think we'd be writing the province till we find out what we're doing.
Okay.
Councillor Day,
Yeah,
on the
on-
merits of referral.
I will be supporting the referral, because if you look at the map on page 175, it's pretty obvious that the area where the Canada Line buffer zone is, you don't need a car. You could hop on the SkyTrain and be downtown and Burnaby and New West in no time. But all those red circles,
Merits of referral.
the referral will hopefully clarify and provide extra options that would have two different zones, one within the Canada Line and one outside of it.
Well, that's up to staff to make recommendations. I'm going to call the question on referral. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. So that brings me to public announcements and events. First of all, we have a couple of appointments, and these go to December 31st, 2026. Oliver Huey is appointed to the Vancouver International Airport Environmental Advisory Committee as a rep from the Advisory Committee on the Environment. David Shemchin was reappointed to the Advisory Design Panel, again for a 2-year term. Then a reminder that February 26th is Pink Shirt Day. Everyone is encouraged to wear pink that day to support anti-bullying in Richmond and across Canada. A number of events and activities will take place across the city this week to highlight anti-bullying. So if you want more information, go to the city website and wear pink on February 26th. We have the Major Projects Oversight Committee. The deadline for applications for this newly established committee is drawing near. Council created the committee as an advisory group to offer independent advice and feedback on the city's capital projects in excess of $50 million. So individuals with executive expertise in capital project management, construction financing, engineering, law, or related fields are encouraged to apply by 5 o'clock Tuesday, March 4th. Again, you can get details on the city website. We have the Richmond Nature Park Bat Exhibit. Richmond being the Lower Mainland's first bat-friendly certified city. To better understand these important flying mammals, the Richmond Nature Park is hosting an exhibition Saturday, March 8th and Sunday the 9th from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. Come to the Nature Park, have your questions answered, and learn all about the bat ecology and conservation from an expert. And finally, Ramadan begins Friday, February 28th. It's a Muslim holy month of reflection, fasting, prayer, and community celebration, and it continues to March 29th. So on behalf of council and the city, we wish everyone a happy Ramadan or Ramadan Mubarak. With that, bylaws for adoption, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 bylaws for final adoption. The first one has opposition and the second does not.
Okay, on the first one, may I have a motion? So moved. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. And on the second one? Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Development Permit Panel, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 recommendations for council. Number 1, that the chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meeting held on August 21st, 2024 be received for information. And recommendation 2, that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of development permit for the property at 11388 Steveston Highway be endorsed and the permit so issued.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. May I have a motion to resolve in a committee of the whole to hear delegations on non-agenda items? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. We have Belinda Boyd and Hugh Freeberg to speak on after-hours outreach in Richmond. Please come forward. And I think you both know the lay of the land. You've got 5 minutes. Please introduce yourselves.
I will speak quickly. Thank you. My name is Belinda Boyd, and I'm here as the co-chair of the Richmond Food Aid Coalition. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about after-hours outreach and the ongoing critical need for this in Richmond. I want to commend the city for allocating funds in their 2024 and 2025 budget for this critical service in our community. You will recall in the 2023 homeless count, the homelessness increased in Richmond by 91%, from 85 individuals in 2020 to 162. This increase aligns with the current number of meals required by the outreach workers for distribution, which have increased since inception of food aid delivery in 2012 by 400%. Just since 2023, the increase in meals has been 220%, when meals went from 35 to each night to 80 to 100. This is 25,000 meals per year. The increased food costs have resulted in the provision of these meals as an estimated cost of $170,000 a year, which is funded by the faith communities of the Food Aid Delivery Coalition. And the faith communities provide meals for the homeless outreach. Hugh, who's here, he's going to speak very soon as I finish. And these faith communities also provide community meals 5 nights a week. So in addition to the outreach, they're doing the community meals for about 100 to 150. So you've got between 180 and 230 meals being offered 5 nights a week. Each faith group, save one, has applied for community grants to offset. Food outreach is a tool that the homeless outreach workers use to connect, and they, in addition, provide additional supports like connecting them to housing, mental health services, substance use, emergency dental, other essential health services. And as we know, with the continued and increasing drug activity in our communities, the corruption that exists in our systems, in our housing market, with money laundering and gang activity, and the impacts to society that we are all very aware of, these costs will continue to increase and will continue to be borne by our community. And we need to be prepared for this. We cannot consider people as expendable or the loss of life acceptable to feed this greed. Since speaking with you last year, we've allocated dedicated funding, or you have allocated dedicated funding for after-hours outreach, which is a very good first step. It's imperative that the funds for this program be used effectively and appropriately. And I don't want to take away time from Hugh, so I'm just going to say we need to recommend that there be evaluation with the city-funded homeless outreach, inclusive of input from clients and the outreach, community-based outreach workers, and to that the city continue to allocate an adequate allotment of city community grants to provide for the food delivery in the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Belinda. My name's Hugh Freeberg. I'm currently working at Church on 5 as the after-hours street outreach worker and a member of the Richmond Food Aid Delivery Coalition. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you. It's been about a year since we spoke and shared some updated, I have some updated information for you. I don't think I have enough time by the looks of it, but hopefully there'll be some questions. Based on the updated Church on 5 stats report, the current client list right now consists of 306 individuals. Of the 306, we've got 257 that are homeless, or at immediate, 257 are homeless or at immediate risk of homelessness. The total clients that are receiving wraparound support is currently 49, which includes but not limited to transitional housing, recently housed or reaching home clients, treatment centers, and corrections. We work in conjunction with St. Albans Outreach and Advocacy team. So, you know, in addition to the 25,000 meals that are annually going out with the 5 community meals contributions, St. Albans has another 6,760 meals that is going out every Sunday. So they've also got the hamper program on Wednesday, hot lunch on Friday, Sunday meal delivery outreach, 130 plus mini hamper meals, and the Tuesday 100 to 150 community meal and outreach, 80 meals for outreach. 306 homeless people within a 14-day cycle, 157 to 160 in Richmond right now, currently homeless. With the winter, that's including who's in the winter shelter of 45. So we got 25 at South Arm Pool and 20 at Brig House, and that's full every night. Of course, we've got another 140 to 146 hidden homeless, which consists of 55 at Richmond House, Salvation Army Richmond House Emergency Shelter, Detox hospitals, jails, Airbnbs, VRBOs, couch surfing, backyard camping, and squatting. I'm out of time. Bummer. I have a demographic comprehensive stats list that I prepared for you guys.
Okay, if you could leave it with the clerk.
I don't have it ready to go, sorry. Can I bring
Okay,
it tomorrow?
well, when it is ready, just give it to our clerk's department and they'll circulate it.
Thanks
Or
kindly.
send it in by email if you want.
Sure, thank you.
Okay,
Any
we've got a
questions?
question from Councillor Day.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. This is obviously very alarming to know that there are so many more homeless people than there were, but it seems to be a trend absolutely everywhere. My question is, it seems like you use food to connect with people. Tell me what the next step is in many cases.
It's funny, I learned a trick when I worked with MCFD years ago, and they'll never admit that it was giving the kid a smoke. But yeah, food is number one, and then after that, it's just giving them the time of day, right? So, it's like UGM's report that they submitted to you, I think 2 years ago. You got a 10-minute window with each person, right? So if that's brief solution-based counseling where you give them 10 minutes, tentative listening, provide some love, give them some, clothes, whatever it is that they need, right? And then on to the next one. So currently we got 7 encampments in the north, 2 in the south, 4 in the central, 1 in the airport region, and that's not including Hamilton or Mitchell Island, so. Sorry.
I just had one other question. So are there any success stories? Like, is it working?
I hate to be such a downer all the time. Of course there's success stories. I've got it all in here, but with the referrals to VCH services and our good friend over here who's an outreach worker, we're working through Ann Vogel, SUAT, Richmond Central Intake, Detox Central Access, and the community treatment, assertive community treatment team. We're getting people to the right places. And we're currently following about 10 people that are in treatment, that are doing well. And are,
what you should do, you're going to give us some statistics, so include those in your statistics.
Absolutely.
Then we'll have a permanent record of it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 questions. Maybe one first to Belinda. You were mentioning that after-hours outreach and funding it and supporting it in the way we have so far is a first step. And I'm trying to just pick up what was your next step. I heard about evaluation needed, allocating allotment. Could you elaborate on that one?
Thanks so much. Currently, there's funding that is allocated to it, but there hasn't been any really great evaluation as yet as to how effective that funding is or the outreach service that's being funded by the city. So in order to evaluate it, it would be great to have not only the people who are the recipients of the outreach service, but the connection with the community-based outreach workers involved in that evaluation.
Great, thanks. A follow-up on that is in regards to our city staff who are outreach workers. We don't have city staff after our outreach workers. Are you seeing other communities nearby, if you've done a municipal scan, that do have after-hour outreach workers hired on staff?
That I'm aware of, Surrey and Vancouver.
Okay, thanks. Last question for Hugh. In regards to, I've seen you do your magic with youth, and I remember a conversation you had around the fact that they didn't have a working cell phone, and when people don't have access to Housing First, and then also don't have a cell phone, that I assume is an extreme challenge on you trying to keep track of your cases. Could you speak on how do you get success if you don't have a house to find them and you don't have a way to contact them?
That's a really good question. Thank you. So yes, if they have a cell phone, obviously we can track them a lot easier. But because a lot of them are suffering with concurrent disorders and they lose their phones or get ripped off, our tracking system is pretty good right now. We're working with the City of Richmond, and we encourage to have more communication with the City of Richmond outreach team. We like to, we share as much information as possible with them, and then working with MS, the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction outreach team. They're great. We're providing 150 probably contacts weekly through them. So, and then working with the police, not as much as I'd like to, because the mental health team, we used to work with them, but not so much anymore. So yeah, we have flags on a map, and we know who's where, but we're constantly they're on the move all the time. So with the winter shelters open and Richmond House, that's a total of about 100 right there that we know where they're at, right? So.
Great, thanks for your work.
All right. Well, thank you both for coming. May I have a motion to rise and report? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you kindly.
So someone move adjournment? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. We are now adjourned.